Live from the pitch pad in New York City. Get ready to unleash your inner entrepreneur with Pitch Live with Amy Summers. Whether you're a seasoned entrepreneur or just dipping your toes into the Shark Tank, this is the place to be to discover how to turn your pitch into reality. Fasten your seatbelts, pitch stars, because the spotlight is on you and we are about to make success happen. Get ready for Pitch Live in 3, 2, 1. Welcome to Pitch Live. I'm your host, Amy Summers, founder and president of Pitch Publicity and Inisivox. I'm also a hardworking entrepreneur who is passionate about helping you reach success in any area of your life. And I know that's possible after decades of experience in perfecting the pitch and enhancing communication skills, which is why I'm here today and joined by Erica Loewe, who is special assistant to the president and chief of staff for public engagement at the White House. Previously, Erica served as President Biden's director of African American media. And prior to joining the Biden-Harris administration, she was deputy communications director to House Majority Whip James E. Clyburn. She's also worked as press secretary for the House Financial Services Committee under Chairwoman Maxine Waters. I first met Erica in 2020 when I invited her to speak on a panel for a communications seminar series focused on racism, hosted by my virtual mentorship company, Inisivox. And Erica and I had both graduated from the University of Florida with PR degrees, and we have served on UF's Alumni Association board. Erica's dedication extends to various volunteer and mentorship roles for organizations, including the Alzheimer's Association, Big Brother and Big Sister Foundation, and Howard University. Welcome, Erica.
Thank you for having me, Amy. Thank you for that amazing introduction. And thank you for all you've done to help me pitch myself. And just to make sure that I get to be in those great Gator rooms with you and so many of our fellow Gators. I appreciate that.
Access, whenever I can give it. I love it. And I just loved having you on the Elephant in the Room series. And Erica is referring just specifically to, I recommended her to the UF Alumni Association board. All her other successes, all her. I've not been involved with that, but I was happy to do it. And I mean, they are so lucky to have you. So thank you for going back to our alma mater and serving them well.
Thank you.
Well, I know you're jammed, so we're going to get right into it. This is a presidential election year that I'm interviewing you in, and I'm so excited to just find out how you make success happen. We call it MSH here, or make shit happen, but we'll go with make success happen just to keep it all on the up and up. We both share a common background. Obviously, we were not at UF at the same time. Erica's graduated, she's younger than I am, so we weren't there at the same time, but she went into politics. I took a different path. I'm just curious, at what moment did you realize your passion for PR in politics?
That's a great question. It didn't start off that way. I did not wake up one morning and say that I'm going to move to Washington, D.C. and I'm going to work for the president of the United States, although I'm really, really glad it happened. It started, I often joke about this, especially with Gators, because, not too long ago, I had the president of UF at the White House. And I was like, I used to work at the UF president's house in the UF president's office. And now I work at the White House, and everything's kind of come full circle. So I remember when I worked there, that was for Dr. Bernie Manchin at the time. I did not know what I wanted to do next. They were kind enough, as Gators often are, to kind of let me stay for a little bit after graduation and figure out what I wanted to do. And, my parents were pushing grad school. I didn't know what I wanted to study. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew I was over school for a little bit and I wanted to take some time, but that wasn't working for them. So I tried to think of ways in which I could do something that would make them leave me alone. And at the time, this is honestly how I think my life's trajectory kind of got kicked off, because at the time it was the Obama-Biden administration that was in office, and there were internships. And I applied for that internship. And I got denied. I applied again. I was waitlisted. And I was like, determined to get this internship, because I was like, if I could work for Barack Obama and Joe Biden, I'm pretty sure my parents would leave me alone about going to grad school. And, God worked it out. And I was able to do that as an intern. And then I stayed, and, things just kind of continued. But that was how I got into this. You do this internship, you do it well enough, you meet enough people, you enjoy it enough. It felt like people were doing really meaningful and purposeful work. And as a result, here I am, over a decade later, still working in the same place that I was.
The motivator was your parents saying you had to go back to school, and you're like, oh no, that's not happening.
It was. I mean, that was the impetus for it. But I will say that once I did it, I was like, oh, this is actually meaningful work that I enjoy, and I feel like we're making a difference here, and I'd like to try this out. And I never stopped.
Now, I want to go back, because you just kind of went through that really quickly. But I mean, this is a very competitive program, from what I understand, the White House internship program. It's not easy to get into. You mentioned you were denied. I could hear your voice in that. There's a lot of emotion there. So there are a lot of college students that do watch this podcast. So, and many of them may be very interested in a career in politics and want to be in this program. Take us back to that time. What did you learn, about being denied, that you obviously went back and repitched yourself? How did you pitch yourself to get into this program? What worked?
I will say a couple things. And as cliche as it sounds, like, I think rejection is sometimes protection. When I initially applied, that was my sophomore year. When I actually got it, it was shortly after my senior year, when I was ready to move to DC and stay there for a while and network and meet people and do what I needed to do to actually eventually get a job. So, one might argue that I wasn't really ready when I initially applied. So I would tell people, sometimes the denial is really just a delay, and it doesn't mean that it's a no forever. But what I ended up doing, because I had graduated, because I was fortunate to have family here in DC. And as a result of that, I decided to move. People said that often in DC, you're out of sight. When you're out of sight, you're out of mind. So I said, okay, well, let me put myself at the top of the minds of people. And so shortly after graduation, I moved to DC. I lived in my cousin's basement. I was fortunate to get a paid internship at a firm, thanks to the University of Florida. And I would just meet as many people as possible, because the thing about DC, it's kind of a revolving door. You're always just a couple degrees of separation from somebody else. So I would, troll LinkedIn, and I would look around to see who my common contacts are with people that I wanted to meet. I would talk to people. I would utilize the Gator network, whether it was a family network or whoever. And it was like, anybody who wanted to meet with me, I would meet with. And then I would ask them to introduce me to someone that they know. And I was persistent about that. I had a notebook. I kept logs. I was very persistent about, not just meeting with them, but expressing gratitude and trying to add value. And how you add value oftentimes when you're young is really free labor. Because you don't have a whole lot of skills. You don't have a lot of experience. So, now I'm thankful that I've learned a thing or two, and I don't have to work for free, and I can
charge for that labor now.
Yeah. Yeah. I can offer, some of that experience and knowledge that I have picked up over the years. But at the time, all I really had was like, I'm here, I'm hungry, I'm willing to do things that a lot of people aren't. And that's what I did. And how I actually got my first job in DC was because I offered to work the door of a fundraiser. And this was like after the hours during my internship, and everybody that I talked to, if they were willing to, they seemed friendly and willing to talk to me, I would tell them I'm looking for a job, and I would talk to them about who I was. Some of them would give me their cards, and I would follow up with my resume, and that was how I actually pitched myself.
You literally put your foot in the door and got the word out about Erica. I think that's great. A few things that you said. First, that it sounds to me like you just moved to DC without an internship or job initially, right? And when you were in the basement of that family member?
Well, no, University of Florida had connected me with that internship. So I didn't take a complete step on blind faith. I did have a paid internship when I moved out here, but the purpose of moving out here was to get the White House internship and to turn that wait list into a yes.
And then I like how you say that you were very active with connecting with people and then telling them that you were looking for a job. I think so many times we don't do that. We don't tell people what our goals are, and so they don't know how to help us.
Right. And what I learned and what I wasn't doing, what I would recommend that anybody who was in that position start to do is tell them exactly what it is that you're looking to do. Tell them what you're good at. Tell them what you're interested in. Like, people come up to, at least me personally, all the time. Like, I want to work here and I want to do this. And it's like, that's great. A lot of people do, but be more specific so that when something specific comes to my desk, I can say, oh, this person mentioned that to me. Like, that's what I think helps people help you. And I tried really hard to help people help me.
Did you have a lot of mentors early in your career that you can recall that helped you in the beginning?
Yes and no. Like, I don't think I fully understood that they were mentors, but I had people in my life. I think we try to formalize that.
Mhm.
There were people in my life who were always willing to be helpful. There were people who were in my life who were willing to be a sounding board. I did not know anybody in politics. I don't come from a political family that was able to connect me to the job that I was looking for. So I definitely had to work my way up, but there were people in my life who were separated from it, but who were they saw something in me and they wanted to do whatever they could, albeit often limited, to help me get there. So yes,
And I know you mentor a lot now. So
I try.
do you actively seek mentees, or do they just come to you like bees to honey?
No, I told them I'm not looking for any more jobs. But they often kind of fall in my lap, and and I will say I do have this, particularly right now. I have this kind of cohort of girls that work in the White House, and some of them work in my office. And I did not seek them out, no. But oftentimes they will seek me out. But I think what makes folks stand apart from others, and I think this is what I've been told about myself, is just people who are willing to do the work. Like, it's one thing to just meet people and just want to get ahead, but it becomes very clear the difference between someone who is looking for a leg up and someone who's willing to roll up their sleeves and actually do the work. And those are the people that I tend to not be able to get rid of.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about your first position at the White House, which was Director of African American Media. Was this a role that was established as a new department within the Biden-Harris administration, or had it always existed? And how did you get this position?
Well, it definitely existed before me. I think there was a time it was called specialty media and coalition media, and it became, more and more explicit as time went on. I will say that I personally believe that President Biden had the most robust Black media program in office. And I'm not just saying that because I was the director, but I think he was very explicit in his mandate that we needed to kick the doors open and make sure that not only are we providing access to media that often gets left out, but that we're also communicating to the communities that, one, helped him get into office, and two, because because all of his policies were implemented through a lens of equity, we need to make sure folks know what exactly like the equity pieces are in each of his or not legislation, rather, that's Congress, but each of his rollouts or his policy or initiatives.
And what were your key responsibilities in this position when you had this position?
It was just that. It was providing a seat at the table. It was making sure that, when the big boys, when ABC and NBC and New York Times are in the press pool, that there is someone from the community that also has a seat and is equally positioned at the table. So whether it's a press conference, whether, he's going on a trip, the majority of what he does is a very public, and often a press focused initiative. And when that happens, we have to make sure that folks that aren't often thought of are in the room too. And that was the job. And then, when he is rolling out or making announcements or issuing statements, not everyone is on whitehouse.gov waiting for that next update, like myself. So I need to make sure that is shared with communities across the country. And I think and I also need to make sure that it was shared in a way that folks would be interested or want to understand.
In this role, were you pitching at media, or were you fielding a lot of people coming to you saying, hey, we would like an
Both.
interview? Which way does it come?
Both. I think it depends on the day. I think there are some issues that, folks will jump all over. When we would do various events at the White House, or if there are just certain issues that are just hot button issues that folks like, when he releases policing executive order, that's something that people naturally just kind of gravitated to because it was a hot button issue. It was on the heels of George Floyd and the like. But then there are other things, like for instance, junk fees. People are like, what the heck is a junk fee? And sometimes you have to kind of go to them and help folks understand, this actually impacts your pockets and your bottom line. Like Joe Biden is trying to make sure that you're not charged excessive or exorbitant fees when you're buying, say, tickets to the movie or tickets to a concert or in healthcare or other sectors. Like that adds up after a while. There's taxes, there's additional fees. And then after a while, it's like this $40 purchase became a $100 purchase. How? Why? Well, Joe Biden and his team are looking into that and they're cutting those costs. But it's like when you hear junk fees on its face, it's like, I don't know what that is, but now I do because someone pitched it and shared it and kind of helped break it down for us. And that was my job.
You mentioned mainstream media, the big guys like CNN and Fox News. And, we wanted to make sure that, Black media also had front row access. How is Black media different than mainstream media in reporting? If you had to describe it to someone, what makes it different?
And I'm probably, I don't want to misquote Madam Vice President, but I remember when the president signed an anti-lynching bill and the descendants of Ida B. Wells happened to be there, and they were a part of the celebration because Ida B. Wells often uncovered a lot of the injustices that were happening in the country to her great risk. And I remember the vice president saying that, Black media were the truth tellers and the storytellers and the ones who were willing to tell stories that others were not. And I think that, or I know that is how Black media started. In the mainstream press, it was often taboo to share photos or just narratives of the injustices that were happening in this country. For instance, when Emmett Till was murdered, it was Jet Magazine and it was the Chicago Defender that were the outlets that were brave enough to show his beaten and brutalized face to the world, horrifying the country. Black media had to do that because the mainstream media entities weren't going to do it, and they did not do it until Black media forced them to.
Taking the filter off. Here's what's really happening. I don't know if you have time to watch shows or at all, probably not, but HBO has the Gilded Age. And, if anybody watches that show, they can really see the importance of Black media during the 1800s right here in New York City where I live. So it's kind of fascinating for me to watch. There's a character called Peggy Scott. She's played by Floridian Danae Benton. And, it's interesting to watch exactly what you said. They were the truth tellers, 1800s. I mean, there was a lot of lynchings and things going on. They were even traveling from New York to the South. They had one episode to kind of show all of this. How has it changed today? I mean, here we are, 2024. Is it changed at all, or is it still a lot of that, a lot of stories that are not getting out?
I think that, Black media still very much shows its value, oftentimes by just focusing on story. There's such a demand for attention everywhere, as I'm sure you know, and it's very hard to get media, the American public, to really focus on anything because we're in this like 24-hour news cycle. There's social media and the like, and I think where Black media continues to find its niche area and add value to the population is that their 24/7 news coverage is focused on the stories that are priorities for the Black community. And that's just not going to be the case anywhere else. And it doesn't necessarily have to be, right? But Black media is still drawing attention to issues. You'll often find that issues that eventually make its way to the mainstream as it pertains to the Black community often start in Black media and then get pick up later.
It's amazing that you had that opportunity. They've already moved you up to a special assistant to the president and chief of staff for public engagement at the White House. What's different about your new position and what excites you most about this role?
What I love the most is what's the same. And the same is that the goal is still to kick open the doors and provide access to communities that historically haven't had access. It's just kind of casting a wider net, right? So instead of being on the comms side, even though I feel like I could never fully leave the comms side, but instead of being on the comms side, it's more of the engagement side. So it's more, civil rights leaders and various stakeholders, that basically all the other stakeholders that are not press. And my office handles a variety of portfolios. So that's, civil rights, coalitions. We do events and programming for the White House. And in those buckets, there's Black, Latino, Asian, Jewish, Muslim, women's, sports, rural, the disability community. Like the list goes on and on and on. But it's like we make sure that these specialized communities have a point person. And again, we make sure that the doors are always open to them because it's the people's house. So it's a little bit of what I did before, but just with casting a wider net and on a slightly larger scale.
And are you coming up with these events with your team, or is someone saying, okay, this is the event we're doing, now get it out there?
It's a group effort. Obviously we have to work there. Nothing at the White House happens through just one office. So, it is the East Wing, as they call it, the First Lady's domain. She is the host of all things that happened at the White House, or the hostess rather. And so, we work closely with her team. We work closely with other departments, whether it's the policy councils, the gender policy council, the domestic policy council, the national security council, whoever is running point or relevant to the issue that we're addressing that day. We work closely together. And sometimes it's someone else's idea and we're helping to implement it. Sometimes we're driving it. It depends. But at the end of the day, whatever it is, it's going to align with the president's message and policy priorities for the community that we're addressing that day.
Now, you've been in DC working in politics for more than a decade now. Would you say that it's gotten easier or more difficult to pitch politicians to the media?
Both. Because I think there are more there are certainly, and I know, there are more platforms to be pitched on, or more platforms to utilize for whatever it is that you're trying to pitch than existed over a decade ago. So I think that's the plus. But I think also folks are distracted, and there's like this element of fatigue where it's really hard to get a message to seep through, which I don't remember that being the case. Certainly when I first moved out here, and I imagine even less so, before I even, started to think about working in this space.
So I mean, even in just 10 years, you've probably seen it's been such a difference as far as communication and media goes. I mean, there's been so many changes, right?
Yeah, but primarily on the social media front. I think the social media front, I think what makes it more difficult, or at least what I have found to be the most frustrating, is that if something, whether it's true or not, ends up on social media, it could spread like wildfire, and there's nothing you can do because there are no journalistic standards on social media. And people are on social media 24/7. So they see it and it's nothing to just repost it, and you repost and it goes viral. And then, by the time you realize what's happened, it's like it's almost like you've missed an entire news cycle and it's only been an hour.
Yeah. I'm always checking my mom because she'll like call me and say, oh, did you know about this? I'm like, where did you get that from? Are you on Facebook?
Exactly. So I guess to answer your question, I think it's easier because it's great if something, true and good is being shared around social media. And it's like, oh, that never would have happened 10 years ago or before, because we didn't have the Instagrams and the other platforms that we have now. But I also think it's a lot more difficult to get folks to focus on a particular issue, because in an hour that goes viral and then folks just move on. And now it's like the next post.
Kind of a similar question, but in today's landscape, media, it seems like is just labeled. They're either conservative or liberal. And despite the expectation that media should be unbiased, that's how it should be, right?
Right.
But when pitching politicians from different parties, do you tend to prioritize certain outlets? Are there media channels you just flat out avoid pitching altogether?
I try to be an equal opportunity.
All access, right?
Yeah, I do try. Like there is no media outlet that gets totally shut out. In my portfolio, it was Black media. Um, and there weren't. Oh, I mean, there are a number of Black media outlets, but it's not like there were a ton that were at the White House every day. There are probably a handful of Black media outlets that have the resources to have folks stationed at the White House regularly. So I worked with them more because they were just there. But I also was very cognizant of the fact that the purpose of the job is to provide access to those who can't for themselves. So a lot of what we did and continue to do is virtual, or oftentimes, we will invite folks to come with ample notice for special occasions so that they can get their ducks in a row and get there. And we make sure that when the president and the vice president and the first lady and the second gentleman are traveling, that if they're traveling to a place where that Black media entity happens to exist, we connect them on the ground. So we meet people where they are.
Now, I'm only asking this because just in my pitching experience, sometimes I'll have a client and I'll get them this great opportunity on an outlet. And maybe I don't know their political persuasion at all, but then all of a sudden it's like, I'm not going on there. I'm like, what? Why? Why are you not going on there? What's going on? And maybe their topic is just, I'm not dealing all the time in politics, although I have had some political clients here and there, but like it may just be a health topic. And they're like, I had no idea what their political position is, and now they don't want to do it. Is there any like specific media outlets that you decline interview requests for any politicians? I'm not talking about necessarily like right now, the second with Biden, but like at any time, have you ever had to decline something just because it was better to forego it than risk getting the wrong message out? Or do you take everything and just prep your politician and throw them in the lion's den?
No. I think it depends on who your principal is. And, some are more open to doing constant press than others. So it's like keeping that in mind. You have to know who it is that you're working for. Two, it's often it's not possible scheduling wise to take everything, because at least in my experience, the folks that I've been blessed to work for have often been very popular amongst the press. So I had to do a lot less pitching and a lot more just kind of fielding, which I find to be pretty exciting. I know others find it to be less of a challenge, but not me, because I think the challenge is really just figuring out what the priority is, what makes sense, what we can make work. So yes, there are often, at least in my experience, probably more declines than acceptances, not because we don't necessarily want to do them. It's just, it's not feasible in the moment for a variety of reasons, which is why, I always try to do press calls and, invite people to various trips and the like to make sure that they're getting those touches, because everyone wants a one-on-one. And it's just, in my experience, it's never been feasible.
How do you handle negative or critical media coverage of any politician you've ever represented? Like, how do you handle that, and how does that change your pitching strategies? Can you think of a time or an example when something was like specifically critical? Did it change the way you approach?
For sure. I mean, I think back to when I worked on the House Financial Services Committee for Maxine Waters, and we were making the transition from the minority to the majority. And she was going to be the first Black person to run that powerful committee. And I remember just the press, the financial services press, being so negative, and there were so much coded language about the fact that she was a woman, the fact that she was a Black, and just they said things about her that they would never have said about her white male counterpart. And that required, and as you may or may not know, like Maxine Waters doesn't take anything just sitting down, and she requires her staff to stand with her. And we did. We worked around the clock to make sure to just push back on untrue and unfair narratives And while simultaneously, reaching out to folks who we had historically worked with that had been fair to see if they were interested in telling the actual story as we saw it from our vantage point.
That's interesting. So, when you are getting that criticism, sometimes it's a time to ramp up your media effort, you would say, and get that positive push out.
I think it's a mix. It's ramping up, but also being very quick with the corrections.
Mm-hmm. Can you share with us, a challenging situation from pitching a political figure in the past, and what you learned from that experience? Is there anything that really sticks out to you that you're like, wow, when this happened, now I always operate this way? Is there anything that really sticks out to you as a challenge? Or just a memorable story that you're like, okay, I'll never do that again, or I'll always do this again. It can be positive too.
Yeah, I think it's, not taking for granted that misinformation is real. And I think especially now, if I hear some narrative that I know isn't true, don't just sit on it, but proactively address it. And I think I've seen that in a number of occasions. I think the one that is probably the one that sticks out to me most is probably the president's record on HBCUs. President Biden has given more to HBCUs than any president in history. We know that it's a fact. You can check the appropriations funding. It's just the numbers do not lie. And HBCU presidents will tell you that. But early in his administration, there was this terrible lie that started with an outlet and just went like wildfire that not only didn't give him the credit for giving this unprecedented funding, but it said that he defunded HBCUs, and people believed that, and it spread like wildfire. And that was one of the first and probably hardest lessons I learned about the danger of misinformation and social media and kind of like this new world order we're living in as it pertains to the press. Because folks are everyone has their own agenda, and there are going to be people that will believe the other side if you allow them to. And it's incumbent on us as staff, on whether it's engagement, whether it's comms and the like, to make sure that people have the facts. And that's certainly what we did. And I know we've turned it around since then, but it took a minute because I think we were all really surprised that someone would not only spread that lie, but like credible outlets would pick it up, and that people across the country would believe such a thing.
Now, you mentioned TikTok a couple times, and I know TikTok
I have not mentioned TikTok, and I am not talking about TikTok.
Well, okay, let's talk about any other social media, because I think I saw a statistic that said more than half of Gen Z gets their news from social media. How important is it to have politicians on social media? A lot of them are, because they're trying to get their message out. Is that still a important place to be, or you just try to avoid it because you can't have any credibility, or you're not sure about the information? Is it important for them to be on social media?
Absolutely. Social media. I've never worked for a politician that hasn't been on social media. I imagine I never will. Social media is critical to the media and messaging landscape. It's clearly not going anywhere. And I think I said, it's very effective in getting your messaging out quickly. It also can be very dangerous because there aren't many guardrails. But I use social media every day in my personal life. I use social media every day in my professional life. If you want to get something out and you want to get it out quickly and you want to tell your own story, which I think is the real power in social media, I can't imagine. I don't understand people who have chosen not to engage there.
And please follow Erica, because then you get to see all the cool aspects of her job, like being on Air Force One and going to like big events, which I think you're off to after this podcast recording.
Yeah, and it's great. But I tell people all the time, it's like social media is also a compilation of our best moments. It's not reflective of our everyday. And
you have some good ones. I'm just going to say.
I do. Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
You have a lot of good ones. And they're like high quality ones. I'm just like, my good moment is here I am walking my dog again in Central Park. You're like, oh, just casual. I'm on Air Force One. No big deal.
You're funny. That is fair. I have been blessed to get some great content. But like I said, and I try to tell, especially younger people, I'm just like, do not judge how someone's life is going based on what you see on their grid. Because that is something that, folks will post once every couple of weeks and you have no idea what's happening with them on those days in between.
That's right. We're going to wrap up soon, but I can't wrap up without asking this very important question because we are in election year this year when we're taping this. But, every year I feel like we're voting on something, right? I've seen a lot of conflicting polls and articles that Gen Z is not voting for Biden or they're not voting for Trump. And I've heard a lot of even, professors from even our university say things like, oh, they're not voting at all. I mean, what would be your pitch to the next generation, Gen Z, coming up here to vote and stay engaged in the political process? Because I know a lot of people just feel like, there's nobody that I want to vote for, so I'm just not going to vote.
I think inaction is a mistake. If you want there to be change, then you have to be the change that you want to see. You have to be a part of the change. I can't really talk about the election specifically because of the Hatch Act, and I'll get a whole bunch of trouble. But what I can say is that the reason that I moved to DC, aside from trying to get my parents off my back, well, I should say the reason I stayed in DC is because I saw that change started here, and I wanted to be a part of that change. The reason that I work for Joe Biden is because I believe that he has been on the right side of history. I believe that there is a huge contrast between him and other leaders of this country. And I want to be on the right side of history when all is said and done. I was in the Capitol on January 6th. I say that all the time. Folks know there's no secret about it. January 6th happened. It was real. And it was an attempt to subvert election results, and they lost. Democracy was fragile, but democracy prevailed. Joe Biden continues to fight for and protect this nation's democracy and the principles on which it was founded. And I want to be a part of that.
So just get out there and make a decision, right?
Make a decision. I can't tell you who to vote for. I mean, folks know where my allegiance lies. I
But
can't.
better to be engaged, right?
But I think to sit it out, is just as harmful as being on the wrong side of history, or doing nothing at all is just as harmful as doing the wrong thing.
Well, I know that you have a lot of things lined up for the rest of your day, and we won't keep you. But before we go, can you tell our Pitch Live community how to connect with you and what type of pitches are you looking for in your position now? Just in case any media is watching, you never know. What are you on the lookout for?
Well, I'm not. I think that if folks are interested in being fair, and they want to paint an honest picture and tell an honest story, and they're interested in learning more about like what my Office of Public Engagement works on and the various communities that the Biden-Harris administration engages, feel free to reach out to me. Feel free to reach out to others on our team. We are very active on social media. We're very active just on the various email space. We have newsletters galore and the like. Just reach out to my office, and we'll gladly get you on every listserv imaginable. On the personal front, I'm probably most active on Instagram at Erica Loewe. But I often will share, exciting things that happen in work, or exciting policies that the president is working on, even though that is in my personal capacity. Because in my personal capacity, I'm still very excited about some of the initiatives that are happening in this country. So, feel free to reach out. We're an open book. There is someone in the Biden-Harris administration that is working on a little bit of everything. So I can't imagine anybody would bring us something that we cannot find you an expert on.
Erica is your access and truth teller and storyteller. Thank you, Erica, so much for joining us today. I know you have inspired so many people in your career journey, and I hope that everyone here will just share this episode and share what Erica has to say. She has so many good tips. It was just chock full of stuff. I couldn't even get a word in edgewise because I just wanted to let her talk the whole time. You can have the whole show. And be sure to get out there and vote and follow Erica on LinkedIn, Instagram. at Erica P. Loewe. And we're going to have all of these links in our show notes. Thank you, Erica, for coming on today and spending some time with us. And thank you, everyone, for joining us on this episode of Pitch Live with Amy Summers. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and give us a rating or review. Your feedback helps us plan future episodes. I hope you were inspired today to get out and vote, first of all, and pitch and advocate for yourself and make success happen. As a bonus, join us at emisivox.com, where you can get motivated, hone your communication skills, and binge as much mentorship as you want whenever you need it. The link's going to be in our show notes, along with all of Erica's links and my links. And just keep making success happen, Erica. We're going to be watching you.
Thank you, Amy. I appreciate the time.
All right. Thank you.